Hello everyone, welcome back to the Remembrancers Library. My name's Ethan. At the top of this, we just want to apologise for last week. Both me and Vincent got extremely busy with Vincent being out of town and getting over that sickness that he was having and just having to fester in that. And I had a graduation event that I had to go to with my college. And so due to that, we kind of lost track of time and forgot to record a podcast last week. So we're really sorry about that. We are thankful for your guys' continued support though. So, you know, the usual stuff. If you are on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want to. If you're anywhere else, thank you so much for following us and, helping us do what we do. But with that, let's get into this week's episode. So this week, continuing on with our focus on the Sol system and how it goes, we are going to be talking about Terra and maybe Mars today, depending on how long this goes. Terra, as we know, is the main hub. It is the Imperium of Man's home base. That's where they live. That's where, humanity's cradle is Terra. So when it comes to Terra, in the first two millennium of humanity's history, well, not the first 2 millennium, for the first long while, humanity's history is exactly the same in Warhammer as it is in real life. With the exception of Necrons and, Eldari and Orcs and the Emperor and all that sort of stuff happening further away in the galaxy. So for the first couple of thousand years, humanity's development is exactly the same as it is on Earth. We have the Egyptians, we have the Mongolians, we have, Britain's rise to power, America's rise to power. Every war, every civilization, every empire, everything that existed before 2020, whatever, that we're currently in, humanity's development was exactly the same. But as we start to get closer and closer to the 25,000 and all that sort of stuff, roughly around about the time that humanity developed the ability to travel the stars, get out into the galaxy and get out into the universe, this is when things start to change. As we would do in real life, the first colonies that were made in the galaxy of 40k were all the planets and moons of the Sol system. So we're talking Mars, we're talking Jupiter, we're talking Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Venus, all those things. They were all colonized first. And due to this boosted the Sol system quite a bit, and it also made it so Terra itself kind of had an industrial boom. As they were colonizing and as they were terraforming these worlds or their moons, they started to get a large increase in technological output, building output, everything. And they were essentially readying themselves to terraform the rest of the galaxy. And this was around about the time that a thing called the Stellar Exodus happened, where during the beginning years of the Dark Age of technology, humanity left into the wider galaxy. After colonizing Mars and the rest of the galaxy and the rest of the system, they set their sights on the galaxy at large. As they were trying to figure this out, this was roughly around about the time that humanity discovered warp travel and discovered the warp. And this was also around about the time that the gates, as we talked about last week, the Elysium Gate, one of the Elysium Gate as an example, was built, and humanity started to go out and explore the stars using warp travel. With all that being said, Terra itself was experiencing a boom, an industrial, an economic, a societal boom. They had pushed themselves to the pinnacle of what life could be, and they were exploring the galaxy. They were colonizing worlds, building their empire, all without the help of the Emperor, by the way, because he wasn't there yet. And they were getting ready to be the pinnacle of life. They were ready to build what they needed to build, automate everything, have the Men of Iron running the show and all that sort of stuff, so humanity themselves could sit back and enjoy life and enjoy what was going on. But as we know, in the world of 40k, nothing ever happens the way people want it to happen. So this is when the Age of Strife comes into play. As we know, warp storms galore across the galaxy, shutting down warp systems, astropathic relays just not working at all, and because of this, Terra itself fell into absolute chaos. Rivaling war bands, people grabbing for power. There we go. People mutating due to mass amounts of radiation from nuclear warfare. The at some point around this time, the seas dry up and Terra becomes a huge, empty, dusty wasteland. Psykers are coming out for the first time, unable to control their power and causing mass destruction. Warlords rising up and claiming massive swaths of this new landscape for their own. It is a mess. It is terrible. And around about this time is when a good friend of ours, the Emperor, comes back into play. What the Emperor does is he starts something called the Unification Wars. And we haven't talked about the Unification Wars quite yet, but the Unification Wars essentially was the Emperor taking down every system that was causing humanity to suffer. We're talking religious cults, we're talking warlords sat up top, massive mounds of ammunition threatening people, the techno-barbarians that were just across the wasteland, knocking down psykers, stopping them from using their powers in ways that could harm humanity, just looking at the world that he loved and deciding that now was his time to bring it back to what it used to be. Excuse me. But also, this was when we got the first prototypes of Space Marines, because the Emperor had his Thunder Warriors, and he had them, and they would do his bidding, and they would destroy buildings, kill people en masse, and everything. But they were too barbaric. They were bred for war and only war, unlike the Space Marines. Due to this, things got a little bit rough on Terra for a while, but after the Emperor got everything figured out and back up to snuff, the old Terra was doing just fine. After this time, the Emperor disembarked on a huge project to revitalize Terra. So he set about rebuilding and shaping Terra into a huge colony world. He wanted it to be the peak of the human empire when they finally are able to get back out into the universe. So in doing so, he builds the Palace of Terra, the huge, 500 kilometer wide palace, and he sits it atop the highest peak on Terra. So he sits at atop Mount Everest. And from basically most anywhere in Terra, you can see the brilliance that is the Emperor's light, essentially. So, as we know, after this, the warp storms lift, and Terra is open again to the universe. And this is when the Emperor decides that now is the time to reunify the galaxy. So he heads out on the Great Crusade. And during this time, obviously, forgetting about this, is when the Primarchs are made. So the Emperor goes out on his Great Crusade, and he is boosting, and even while he's gone, he's boosting Terra. He is rebuilding communications, opening up supply lines, everything. Terra is starting to experience a massive boom, and it is essentially an era of peace for anybody who lives on Terra. On Terra specifically, not in the wider galaxy, but for those on Terra, it is essentially an era of peace and prosperity that they are living through and getting to experience. So, after this, though, after the Great Crusade, we know what happens next. The Horus Heresy, and yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. The Siege of Terra happens, and Terra is left in a headspin. There is war across the planet, chaos cults rising up everywhere, causing people to lose their faith in the Emperor or gain more faith in the Emperor, and not to mention the efforts of legions such as the World Eaters and the Emperor's Children and the Blood Angels, as one of them, do not exactly breed a hope in the people of Earth, of Terra, I should say, as the Emperor's Children are kidnapping and stealing people to turn them into drugs. The World Eaters are barbaric and killing anybody in their sights. And after the tragic death of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels, of course, go into their Black Rage. And anybody in their sights, Space Marine, Imperial Guardsman, anybody, is slayed and cut down due to this. So after this, life on Terra becomes quite depressing and quite sad. And as we know, moving into the current world of 40k, the Emperor is put onto his golden throne and he is left there. So Terra essentially becomes a holy site for the people of the Imperium. And that's where the that's where Terra stands today, as a holy site and the center of the Imperium's great collective of planets and communities, and life in the Imperium as we know it is based on life on Terra. So moving on to Mars now, and Mars, much like Terra, during that time of expansion and that technological boon that humanity as a species was experiencing, Mars came into quite an interesting position, as they were the closest planet to Earth, and due to be it to massive amounts of ore and mineral, or maybe just being a prototype planet to see if terraforming can work. Mars becomes essentially the smaller version of Terra at this time. They are a fully inhabited hive world at this point. They are having a boom of industry, and they are becoming what is the beginnings of the Mechanicum. As they start doing research, they investigate new industrial practices to find ways to build more stuff. And during this time, Mars and Earth lived in peace. They were trading backwards and forwards with one another. You could go to Mars for your holiday, go back to Earth for your holiday, that kind of thing. And it became, like I said, a smaller version of Earth. It was essentially a perfect example of what the Terrans wanted the rest of the galaxy to be. Fully terraformed worlds, ready for human inhabitation, that would usher in an era of peace across the galaxy and expand humanity's empire across the stars. But during the Age of Strife, Mars suffered incredibly hard, as when the warp storms broke down and prevented travel between planets, the radiation shields on Mars broke down, causing the planet's atmosphere to change, the surface be absolutely bombarded by solar radiation and cosmic radiation, causing the inhabitants to essentially go mad. And many of them were driven underground, but many more of them were turned into horrible mutants or techno-barbarians. And much like on Earth, with the emergence of psykers in communities, psykers were also causing their own havoc and ripping apart communities and ripping apart the world. And not to mention, with Mars specifically, they had the pain of having to deal with abominable intelligence, AI gone rogue. And this would stop machinery, vent atmosphere from buildings, cause machinery to go haywire, killing people. All in all, just a bad time for anybody who was near it. So those who were driven underground had to relearn how to deal with every technology that they had. Air filters, cooling systems, heating systems, power generators, everything had to be done by hand. And due to this, a technological cult was born. And the reason for that being is because they had very little technicians, and those technicians were seen as being blessed by the Omnissiah. And as we know, the Omnissiah is the Mechanicum's god. So at this time, we have the Mechanicum being born. So, as the Great Crusade was kicked up into gear, the first planet on the Emperor's watch list was Terra. So he went out and he found Terra, and killing all the techno-barbarians, the AI gone rogue, the mutants, all those sorts of things. The Emperor would seek to bring Mars, back into the fold. But he was quite surprised to find Mars in a little bit of a technological boom, as those that were driven underground kept driving underground. They kept building, they kept constructing, they kept testing, inventing, making new things and such. So the Emperor was surprised and quite happy to find that Mars was ready to go, and he didn't have to do much more than purge the surface of what they had done. But with that, the Emperor was not too well plussed about the fact that he also had to deal with one more cult, one more religion that was getting in his way. But he could not defeat the Mechanicum. Then Their navy, their robots, their machines, their titans were too much for the Emperor and his armies to defeat. So he decided that he needed to ally with the Mechanicum. And in doing so, as Mars would help build the ships, the warp gates, everything that was needed for the Imperium to work out. So the Imperium of Mankind started with Mars and Terra, and it shot humanity's empire into a bold greatness. But all good things can't stay forever. So it's around about this point as well that the Horus Heresy happens, and Mars is driven into another dark age as the Dark Mechanicum rips apart the planet, fills factoriums with lava and chemical, and causes Mars to be inhabited by terrible machines, Dark Mechanicum leaders, and ruins what Mars once was. But after this, Mars started to rebuild itself and became the Mars we know it as today, the huge cult world where servitors are made, titans are made, all types of weaponry is researched and made, STCs are researched, and new technologies are sent into the Imperium. And that is how it stands today. So, yes, thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, comment on YouTube if you can, everywhere else. Download, repost, whatever you guys want to do to help us out. But thank you guys for listening, and we will hopefully see you next week. A bit less chaotic and a bit more refined. But thank you, and bye!